So I thought I would talk about how I overcame drug addiction, alcoholism, obesity, and severe depression. There's quite a lot of negative aspects of one character, but I was able to overcome them. Was it a long road? Yes, it was. So starting out, by the time I was 13 years old, I weighed 213 pounds, which is roughly about 100 kilos. I was eating all the time, constantly, and it showed. I was very, very obese for my age, very inactive, and I was eating terrible food. I was not eating vegetables. I was eating a lot of processed food, a lot of meat, a lot of heavy sugar foods. And this, I believe, is a lot due to I was weak. I always chose the low road. I was never very strong. I always saw myself as the victim. And when you're the victim, you justify your actions, right? So I would justify eating for comfort, and it showed. I was overweight. I had every excuse why I wasn't losing weight, why I didn't care to exercise, and I suffered from being overweight. A little bit of bullying, more kids just kind of picking fun of me, those kinds of things. And but it really got to me. I was very sensitive. I'm still sensitive today. I'm very real with my emotions. And so I was obese until I was about 15 years old, and I finally said, this is it. I've got to take control of my weight. And I went on a crash diet for about 3.5 months, and I went from 200, roughly about maybe 180, 90 pounds, something like that, to 150 pounds in one summer. And my addiction to food just evolved and changed to a severe addiction to caffeine. I was drinking up to 6 energy drinks a day. I would buy like the 2 for $3 monsters up to 3 times per day, and that would starve my appetite and make it easier not to eat, but consequently it's detrimental to your health. I ended up with an esophagus ulcer because I wasn't nourishing my body properly. And you could see there's photos of me when I was that age. I was very slim and I was not healthy. Also, too, my academic quality in school was very low. I couldn't retain memory. I didn't care to study, those kinds of things. And I didn't enjoy school, the material presented either. But it would have helped if I would have been on a balanced diet. Also, too, sleeping. If you drink 6 monsters a day, I wasn't able to go to sleep till very late, and then I would find myself very tired in the morning until I drank more caffeine. And I was just on this high and low for a long time. And I suffered with an eating kind of disorder to the other way. I wouldn't eat. I'd maybe eat a half a meal a day. I'd maybe eat 300 or 400 calories. And I did that for a while. And my mom actually sent me to a nutritionist to try to balance my diet because it was so out of proportion. And so at this point I was still weak. I still took the low road. I still found myself as the victim. And I didn't realize the consequences of my actions of being weak until I got older and I started seeing how it really affected my life. But I remember vividly there was times where I was in a specific point to choose. Do I want to be strong to overcome this, or do I want to be weak? And I just fell to the weak side. Why? Because being weak, even though you suffer, is often easy. So I drank loads and loads of caffeine, even up once I started taking drugs. I started taking drugs around 17, and mostly prescription pills. And a lot of these prescription pills were illegally bought from kids at school. When I first started taking drugs, I would buy Vicodin, any type of painkiller like that. And I wouldn't buy them every day, but I also had limited resources to money and availability. So if I had all the money in the world, I would have bought drugs every day. So it was my drug experience was based on how much money I had at the time. So I was addicted to prescription medication by the time I was 17, 18 years old. And this went on and off for some time, where I was still in school, still doing these prescription drugs. And I was drinking a bit as well, but then I got into a relationship for about a year and a half, and I kind of quit everything. There was a few times where I did wind up with some medication from friends, and I would take it and kind of recreationally use it in times of that. But for about a year and a half, I was clean. I don't want to get into this relationship. It was an unhealthy relationship, and I finally broke free from it when I was about the time of 20 years old. And once I found myself free, I was into drugs and alcohol. At that time, I started getting most of my drugs by that time from doctors. It's very popular in Western America too. If you have any type of ailment, you can get any drug to cure it. So I was diagnosed, you could say, ADD, which I don't even believe ADD actually exists. I believe that it's a made-up not disease, but ailment, so they can push drugs. But anyways, that's beyond the point. So I was on Adderall by the time I was 20, and I was abusing Adderall from the start. I mean, I would overtake it, take it while drinking, so I could drink more, stay up later, and party harder, and stuff like that. And then I started getting different types of drugs from the doctor, like Xanax and stuff like that, as well as anytime I could get a hold of prescription medication like Vicodin or painkillers, I would. So I was on a hard binge of drinking every weekend, heavy 2 days a week, often would lead to 3 or 4 times a week of heavy drinking, including taking Adderall every day, drinking caffeine on top of that every day, and then any other type of pills that I could get my hands on. So I was drowning myself in every type of substance. And when you're young, your body is really strong, so I was able to push out all of these drugs as they were coming in. I did have a scary overdose, which I can talk about that in a different video. But for the most part, I was able to drink, do drugs, drink as much caffeine as I want, and still function properly at work, and still have a relatively healthy body, or a body strong enough to maintain this type of lifestyle. And this went on for a good couple years. And then I will add in that I did have this drug overdose, and I ended up taking 6 months off of work because it really put a strain on my body and my mental state, and it was bad. Don't really want to get too much into that, but so I took about 6 months off of work. This did not stop my drug addiction. Actually, it got worse because of the drug overdose. I had a bit of problem with apathy in my left leg, muscle apathy, and so I was put on OxyContin, which, for those who know about OxyContin or don't know, it's like the strongest form of painkiller there is before you get to injectable, maybe like heroin or injectable opiates, things like that. And the dosage just kept going up and up and up, and I was abusing my doctor's prescription. She was giving them to me as much as I wanted, and I took advantage of that and kept getting more and more. On top of, I was still on Adderall, and I was still on benzodiazepine, so I was still on Xanax and those other kinds of things. I couldn't sleep, so I was on a sleep medication. I was on like 5 or 6 different medications, drugged up all the time, just completely worthless, really. I was not a functioning member of society. I was on, not disability, but I was on work leave, so I was still getting paid a full paycheck for my work for about 6 months, and not really partying, but just in drugs all the time. Wake up, take drugs, all the way till the time I went to bed. And this happened for, like I said, 6 months, and there was a point when I was completely strung out on drugs. My parents had been traveling at the time. They had come home and realized how much of a wreck I was, and they said, "Blake, you got to do something. Do you want to go to rehab?" And I took the offer. I'm like, yes. I was a joke. I was worthless. Just physically, mentally, I was not productive at all. And so I went to rehab. I also did battle with severe depression, which was kind of came on from an onslaught of a drug that I took to remove my acne that caused like a biological disorder of fungus to grow inside my body that can get into the brain that can cause severe depression. It's not an excuse to why I took all the drugs, but I did battle with severe depression, and it was kind of a factor that caused me to take so many drugs. So I went to rehab when I was 22 and got off of Adderall, which I was thankful to get off of that because I was on it for a few years, and it's terrible. I mean, it's methamphetamines. The highs and lows of it are really tough to handle. and I quit drinking, and I was able to get off of my other prescription medications, except for one. During this time in rehab, I was able to cure, in a sense, my biological depression, the fungus that had grown inside my body because of this medication that I had taken to remove acne. I was able to kind of cure this a bit, and I started kind of digging myself out of this really dark period that I was in. But I was still very attached to the drugs and the alcohol and everything that I was still taking. And I was still very weak at the time. I was not facing my problems. I was trying to deal with my addiction, right? But there's an underlying cause why you take pills and why you abuse drugs and alcohol. And I wasn't looking at these issues. I wasn't looking at the weakness, the fear that I had built up inside of myself. So I was clean for about 6 months getting out of rehab. I got out of rehab, ended up moving to Oregon and started flight school. But I was still, basically the first night I got to Oregon and, was basically getting enrolled in flight school. Me and my roommate, who is actually one of my good friends. What's up, Zach? How's it going? One of my good friends, Zach, and I got drunk right off the bat. I drank, maybe about 14 or 15 beers that night and smoked a whole pack of cigarettes. So immediately I was already falling back into my ways, and for the next 2 years in flight school, I also too was on one medication. When I had this really bad drug overdose, I did some nerve damage to my legs, and I didn't go with an alternative way of healing nerve endings and kind of going to the holistic way. I went to the chemical way, so I just went to my doctor, and she put me on this drug that they use to help aid in nerve damage. And this drug can cause like euphoric feeling and can be used as or abused as a substance to alter your mindful state. And so I was on this drug all the time, overtaking it the entire time through flight school. I was drinking all the time, and I was also on this prescription drug. It was prescribed to me, but I was abusing it. On top of that, I was smoking cigarettes, and I was still drinking energy drinks all the time, at least 2 a day. And it was just a continuous. I wasn't cured of. My depression was better, but I was a wreck still. I was weak. I was not taking care of my body really at all. And so I did about 2 years of this in flight school, and I even saw my body starting to degrade on me. It was not working as well. My kidneys were suffering a lot, and really I was getting worse and worse and worse. I ended up leaving flight school. It's a different story. We'll talk about that later. Went back home and finally got off of this prescription drug and quit drinking. But I was smoking weed every day. Smoking weed every day all the time. So I don't see anything wrong with weed, but you can use it as any type of crutch, like any other drug, that hold you back from facing your problems and becoming a productive member of society, to be your best version. Smoking weed every day can hold you back from being your best version. And so I was smoking weed all the time, and still was very weak, very, very weak. And so I ended up getting a job in Florida, went out to Florida, flew for a bit, ended up quitting that job and came back home. And this was the pivotal moment when I moved to the beach. And I moved in with my mom and her new husband. And I quit smoking weed, I quit drinking, I quit tobacco, and I pretty much quit caffeine. I would have like a cup of tea every so often, maybe a cup of coffee, but very in balance. And I quit everything, and I started facing my fear. So here I'm going to start with basically 4 different things of how I overcame my addictive behaviors, and my addiction to pretty much whatever it was I was addicted to it. Number one, the first step that allowed me to overcome my addictions was I took responsibility for my actions and for who I am. That is first and foremost. You have to be real with yourself. You can no longer be the victim and overcome these deep attachments psychologically, physically, and emotionally that you connect with while taking drugs. And so I really looked at who I am as a person. I was really able to reflect and to see the fear that I had. And fear is attachment. Attachment is to what you consider the present reality to be, and that's how you can justify taking drugs. 1,400 people die, or 1,300 people die a day from smoking cigarettes, but yet how many millions of people smoke cigarettes? And I don't know if you've ever smoked a cigarette before, but you get a little bit of a head buzz, but other than that, it's not like some grand experience. But yet people do it all the time. And so you create these attachments that you justify even your health and dying for doing, even when the outcome is not spectacular. So I looked at my negative qualities and I began to face these fears that I had built up. So number one, I took responsibility. I was real with myself. Number two, I faced my fear. Now, we can be not necessarily afraid of anything and still have a lot of fear within ourselves. Fear is a natural, primal-based emotion. It's natural to express and feel fear, but it can be pushed too far. You can come out of balance and you can start to fear everything. You can have anxiety, which I had to the max. You can have anxiety, you can have social anxiety, you can have fear of being around other people, fear of being seen, fear of whatever it may be. And I had a wide variety of different fears that I never looked at. And it's because I allowed myself to be the victim for so long. So I looked at my fear. I was able to get into certain situations in just everyday reality that I faced, using my intuition and inner guide to get me in uncomfortable situations that allowed me to grow. So I would find myself, my intuition saying, Blake, go talk to this person. Even though I felt fear and did not want to face talking to this person or to face the situation, I did. And I've made other videos that there is no fear in the present moment. Fear is projected into our reality or into our perspective based on past emotions or past situations or past occurrences, things like that. And so all you're doing is when you face a fearful situation, is it's you against yourself. The enemy is within you. So if you get into an uncomfortable situation and you push through it, what you do is you grow to a stronger being and you face the fear within you. It's not that the situation itself is fearful. It's that the fear inside of you is trying to hold you back because you've conditioned yourself in a certain way, but you push through. So number two, I faced my fear. I really expressed incredible amounts of courage in more than 10, 15 different scenarios where I surrendered to the present moment, put aside my fear, my inhibitions, and just kind of flowed with what was going on around me. The life we live is there's a fluidity to it. Nothing is permanent, right? There's no permanence to reality and to situations and events. And when you start flowing, going with the flow, right? Going with the flow of life, you really got to put your inhibitions and fear aside. And it's very liberating. You feel extremely free, but you do have to face these fears. So number two, I faced my fear almost completely. This is also what led me to come traveling as I continued to push my fear and starting to become into balance. It wasn't until I spent 4 months in a village in Laos, which is a country that borders just next to Vietnam, that I was able to really come into balance. I felt a major shift in my perspective and who I am, and I felt that fear was no longer controlling my experience. So next one, I did the work. Now, this is probably one of the most difficult things. I think that any person with drug addiction or any type of addiction or any type of change that occurs, it takes work. Because fear is attachment, and attachment can go very deep into our psychological behavior, our emotional, and our physical being. We can experience even more suffering before we can break free from these conditions, or these attachments, and recondition our being to be separated from these attachments. And so, number 3, I did the work. Was it hard? It was. Yes. Did it take a lot of courage? It took tons of courage. But you feel like a damn lion. You feel like nothing in the world can stop you. And it's when I realized that my entire experience here is realizing that everything that I'm looking for is within me. The answers are here. My joy is here. My fulfillment, my happiness, my love is here. If I have it here, it reflects out into my outer world. And then I start to appreciate the qualities in life. I start accepting more and more moments. I'm here in the present. I'm not off in different realities. Fear doesn't control my being, but compassion and empathy and acceptance and gratitude start to be the forefront of my everyday reality. So it's number 3, I did the work. Is it tough? Yes. Can you do it? Absolutely. And the 4th thing, I got into a proper environment. If you're trying to quit drinking, you can't hang out with guys who drink. If you're trying to quit drinking, you can't go to the bar. If you're trying to quit smoking weed, you can't hang out with people that are rolling up every day. If you're trying to quit tobacco, don't hang out with smokers. It's anything, right? If you're trying to eat better food, don't go hang out in a McDonald's, right? You're going to feel you have to break free from these things. As you get stronger, can you start doing these things? Absolutely. I can go to the bar now and not have one drink, not even care to drink. I enjoy my mindful state every day of being sober, being clear-minded, and being free. Same with tobacco. I can be around people who smoke and I don't care or want to have a cigarette. And definitely drugs. I'm so far beyond wanting, caring, or needing drugs. It's not even in my reality or in my frequency anymore. I've broken free from that. So that's number 4. You got to change the reality, or you got to get into a proper environment to be able to make these things happen. So this is my kind of experience growing up as I delved deeper and deeper into drugs, and how I pulled myself out of it. And wow, my life is 100% better. I no longer have major highs and lows. I take care of my body. I'm not spending crazy amounts on drugs and alcohol that I could otherwise be saving to go traveling or to invest in things that are bettering my life. And I no longer see myself as the victim. I know that anything is possible. And that's one more thing that I want to add on to. I guess you could say this would be step 1, but I'll put it as step 5, is you have to love yourself. And that goes along with step 1, which is taking responsibility. When you take responsibility for your being, you also take the steps in the right direction to love yourself. And when you love yourself, you know anything in the world you can accomplish anything. Nothing is impossible. So, hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have your drug addiction experiences or how you overcame it, I'd love to hear it. So shoot me a message or just enjoy watching. I love you guys like always, and I'll continue to create. All right, see you guys.